Oh, it was a general farmer. Of course, he raised cotton, corn, Capricorn, potatoes, sweet potatoes and Irish potatoes, peanuts, whatever farmer could raise, plus cows, hogs, chickens, turkeys, all that kind of stuff. Cotton, acres and acres of cotton. We used to pick a bale of cotton a day. Yeah, the people that live there with us, we go to the field and we pick, he'd take a bale at night and we'd have a bale when he come back tonight. Sometimes we wouldn't see Pop for 3 or 4 days because we'd leave a bale of cotton in the field and he'd come at night and he'd go and get that bale and bring it to the house and we'd be sleeping and we'd get him leave next morning we'd still be sleeping. I just don't know what caused him to drop. I was there. I just remember that cotton went down and everything and they stopped getting as much to get for a bale of cotton. Plus, if you pick cotton for somebody, you didn't get as much. You pick 100 pounds like you used to get. And the price markets just went off, I guess, and they stopped getting the money for it, as far as I know of. Well, they would pick. Still would pick it. They knew that they could hear it, just like the rest of the folks, that the prices were down. And of course, it just mean that they had to pick more to get more money, I guess, and things like that, And it was all over this area, not here in Oklahoma, whatnot. And some people began to go out western Oklahoma. They tried to go where there was more cotton. The more they could pick, well, naturally, the more they would have. But it just was still was a lot of cotton. People were raising a lot of cotton, but it just wasn't for sale. Well, for the most part around here, they left and they began to, just like anything else, they have cotton. Say if cotton was here, and they'd pick cotton, and when you pick out what you had, you pick with somebody else, and you begin to store up, spend less, and everything else. So you knew wasn't as much money going to be for cotton, and you had to store up for the winter and whatever you're supposed to do. And some people would hear, especially this kind of single people or whatnot, would hear places off western Oklahoma, some other place where there still was a lot of cotton, and they were wanting cotton pickers. Well, they'd get on loads of wagons or covered wagons or cars or whatever, and go to that area and pick, for a couple of months until they picked out, whatnot, come back home and have a good time during the winter, eating and sleeping and staying around home till the next spring come. Well, like I said, my daddy, we had cotton, and we'd pick the cotton and everything, and he and my mother were very good providers for us. There were 5 children of us, and they would provide for whatever we needed, and we understood that. My mother sewed. I was 16 years old before I wore a ready-made dress. She'd sew, and we would sew. And, well, as I said, we just learned, I guess, that you work while you had plenty and then store up something for that rainy day, so to speak. And we've always, the Lord was with us, I guess, with my mother and daddy. We didn't suffer too much, and we always could help somebody else, kind of around about us, because we just, that's just one of those things. And we knew the depression was there, and we just learned to eat less, wear less, and those kinds of things. Or did about everything, and she would see that we did everything. We'd raise the garden. We'd always have a garden. We'd always have a surplus garden that we could share with someone else, and truck patches, we call them, bean patches. We used to pick beans and peas or something like that in a cotton sack, and then thrash them out, put them in a great big can during the wintertime, you see, like you go into the store and buy beans, like you go and buy a bag of beans now. We just go and get out a cup of beans or something like that and soak them and cook them. The land that we lived on, as I understood after I grew up, seemed to have been Indian land, just a lot of Indian land out there. And this Mr. Dawson, leased the land. My daddy leased the land from him. He leased the land. And Papa had his own tools, had his own stock and own everything, and worked the land, and he'd pay so much for the lease each year, whatever the case might be. And we lived like we thought maybe we owned it because we knew we stayed there so long. We grew up there. Well, a tenant farmer, I mean a sharecropper, like if you have some stock, a horse or a cow, whatever thing, and I rent them from you, and I go and work my crop with them, and we pay so much for you each year and so much of the crop. Sometimes they take 3/4. If I make 4 bales of cotton, maybe 2 bales, or 1 bale go to you, a half or whatever the case, whatever agreement we come up with, go to you and whatnot. Other than that, when you lease it for so much, and then whatever you make, you pay that lease. And if you leased it for small money, you happen to come out, you make more than that, where you the beneficiary, I guess, of whatever the case might be. Because long at that time, we didn't know all the details of it, because kids didn't mess in the old folks' business. You just went to work and did what they told you to do. And whenever it came something to do that, we'd ask them. Our father, their parents weren't mean to us or nothing like that, but and they'd tell us anything we'd ask them, but we just didn't need to know. We just knew we'd get on all right. We had cars. When people got cars out in the country and things like that, we had a car. My dad had cultivators. He had mowing machines and had all other kind of things that a lot of other people had down there that owned their land and was doing everything else. My daddy had owned it. And we was always accustomed to those kinds of things. When we'd come to school over here, and when school was out, we'd go home, go to work. During the Depression, the Pretty Boy Floyd, we'd hear about Pretty Boy Floyd along when 32, when Birdwell came in here to this bank and things like that. We'd hear about Pretty Boy Floyd and those kinds of things, but we didn't ever. There were some other outlaws. I can't think of their names now. That down here and down in Texas, that would be loose, and we'd hear about them. And most of we had to talk about. We didn't know them talking about all this sex and stuff kids talk about now. We talk about that kind of stuff, and get a lot of fun out of it. We just hear that they would. Now, if we had some relatives, sometimes lived in some other areas, and they would tell about maybe they was down in that area at one time or another, and what happened down in that part of the country and so forth like that. And we'd talk about it, something like that, especially down in Texas. My mother and father's people were in Louisiana. And then we had some relatives down to Texas, and sometimes they'd hear from them, and they'd tell them that Pretty Boy Floyd, some of those outlaws came through here the other day. I was over in certain area or something like that, I think I started teaching when I started teaching in 32. I finished high school in 30, and after 2 years after I went to college and got 2 years of basic work, I started teaching and going back to school, to college. And I didn't, a lot of things I hear and read about then that I didn't read about maybe before. And for a long time we didn't have any TVs and that kind of stuff back in that time. We'd have radios. Well, that's what they told us. Roland Floyd and them, some of the young men that would be on the streets around, and they said that they would notice any strange cars. Anybody would come into town and kind of check them out, so to speak. And they said that someone came in town, and right down on the corner there where the post office is now, was a 3-story building there, and it was a cafe at the bottom, and all the town was just really flourishing and everything, and it was up and down the streets. And so they noticed that the bank was across the street from that, and they know any kind of strange car come in town, they always pay attention to it. They noticed this car came and said it had a lot of mirrors, and this man sat there and looked and focused these mirrors and everything and round about, and they began to say who he was. And naturally, boys a lot of time, from time to time, they'd pick up on pictures and whatnot, and they would know if the picture looked like someone that they'd seen or heard about or whatnot. So they said that they thought that was him, that he came in and he was looking around, he was trying to see what the situation was. But I was out teaching when Birdwell and them, the group came in here from. Some of them fellows was from over here around Wewoka. Not that I know about. They just I mean, anytime a car come in town, it could be you or anybody else. You just put in a different car would come in town. The youngsters, they would just really notice it, they pay attention to it. I didn't know about it. I didn't think so. I just remember Mr. Turner lived up the street up here, and he was just back in that time, sometimes we had some person that, would just kind of look out like for the whole town and was a banker and everything and provide for the small man as well as the big man, so to speak, and everything like that. And I had never heard it, whether he talked about it or not, because like I said, I was working out of town. And I never heard him saying that they was fearing anything particular about the bank robbery, but he prepared for it, because he had the alarms, and he had a fellow by the name of John Owens who had been a policeman that he didn't back down off of nobody. He wasn't fearful of nobody. When he'd come through the country sometime, we would ride his horses. They'd go bird hunting, and several of them come out in the rural. When you'd see them coming, the children, sometimes they'd get off the road saying like they did this kind of thing. Come that man, you know how people, kids would see that day and time. So he had a market up the street, and he had one of these alarms was in his place. And I don't remember that right now, but there's a couple other places seemed like their attachment was there. And where they had supposed to have it in the bank was some money under this alarm. Under the thing, if you pull it money out, well, the alarm would go off. It wouldn't make a loud sound, particularly there in the bank, but it would at that place let them know something was happening at the bank. And so up the street there, and that day when he asked Turner for the money, and Turner started, I don't know whether he put a bag in there, but he started getting the money, and he just reached over and pulled this one alarm. He said, "You pull that alarm." And Mr. McCormick, who lives up on that hill as you go out on the highway to that house that sits up on the hill, straight on up south there, was in the bank. And he was always mindful of what was happening and what was going on around about him. Very friendly. They really, and a lot of the bankers, I think several of the bankers were kind of stockholders, If they were capable, they'd get up, I mean the bankers, the farmers, or the people that were doing real well and had their farms or accumulated something. Stockholders, they were reliable kind of people that the banks, I don't ever know if they had any white people to come in here and do. They ran their own business. They take care of their own business and was doing real well and set up merchant stores from way down this 1, 2, 3, and right here, there used to be an undertaker's place used to be on this corner. Way up in this corner. Some kind of business down on Main Street here. That they had their own businesses, and it seemed like it was doing real well. Well, we just heard about it. We don't ever know him coming in here doing anything for anybody in this area. We would just hear about, they call him a kind of Robin Hood, that he would robbing from the rich, help him the poor or something like that, you mean? We would hear about that. Now, there was some of these fellows, Bob Brown and them, that came when we had what we call what is this? Is the boys go with have this school, not a school, CC camp. You heard of CC camp? Mm-hmm. When it came in, a lot of fellows came in here from CC camp, and the camp was located just about a half a mile out here on this area. And of course, a lot of them knew about some of these things that we talk about, and they would talk about in that area what had been happening, things like that. But we never had nothing in Boulder just to come in and do that kind of thing like that. The people always would kind of stand together. We had lawyers here, and those kind of people that would kind of see about our affairs and whatnot. What you mean about the bank robber? What you mean about them? I thought we'd kill them if they caught them, brought them in here. We could. we weren't going to let them come in and take advantage of it. Women, well as men, boys, and women and children and whatnot, I mean, they were looking out for the interests of the town, as far as I knew of at that time, and as far as I've ever heard and I've heard some older people and some folk saying here not too long ago was talking about, he said, my grandpeople used to live in Bowling, and said they would always look out for Bowling, they look out for each other, and this thing, that, and other. Said, well, that's why we were taught to look out for each other's interests, and so forth and on like that. And that was true, because the people didn't. The only time I know the Red Cross coming in here in 42, when the storm tornado came through about 4 miles out here, we'd call Charles, would come off what we call coming kind of from this southwest. And I mean, just kind of tore up that part of the country going on across out in that area. And the school out there, they had a nice big brick school. It was 4 teachers' school. I think it's four big rooms there. They kind of came in and kind of turned it kind of to like a hospital. Had one room for a while for women and one for men. Set it up kind of like the Red Cross. No, I don't remember anything about the Depression, nothing. Well, like I said, I just really don't know. Only thing that I can remember mostly, the ones that had it helped the ones that didn't have it. And that kind of stuff. I just don't remember nobody suffering. Children and whatnot, with their clothes and with going to school, whatever was going on with them, if they had to go someplace, we'd see it. It seemed like we would get there, fix food for them, whatever the case might be. I just don't remember that we had no suffering groups, just suffered like that. Yeah. Oh, the cotton, see, each year, all right, say you're raising cotton pretty well. You're going on last year you did pretty well with this and so on. Next year maybe you decide to expand a little bit more, or do something else, and and you'd have some pretty good cotton years or whatnot. And so the cotton then began to just going down. And I remember that back in that day and time, you had, now my mother, she had some feather mattresses. She'd pick geese and they would make feather mattresses, and she'd have these cotton mattresses. And they had cotton bats, we call them, it's something we call them bats, but it's something that you could do cotton with, that you could quilt, make it quilting matting like what you buy now at the store for quilting, make it soft. Well, they do this cotton up like that and put it in the mattresses, and you'd have real good sleeping mattresses and things like that. So my mother and several other ladies down there, my mother didn't do no picking cotton in too much. She'd come out in the field a little bit, but she'd always do a cook and fix our dinner and folks and that kind of stuff. But they went to the field, the cotton was just left in the field, and folks saying, no need of picking it, go into the gin because it's not cost, we can't get nothing out of it too much. They decided, well, we can renew our mattresses. They then started going picking cotton, and my daddy, I know my daddy did, and some other men, they would carry it to the gin, let them gin it, get all that seed and everything out of it, and then make it real soft and all that kind of stuff, and get it out there. And then they'd do good mattresses, and I think we may have some mattresses around and pillows and things like that. And of course the cotton just got so cheap, and then they began to leave it in the field, and see cows will eat the cotton out of it, put it out the bowl with that seed in it, and chew it and eat. And so then they began to turn the cows out in it and last. And so my mother felt like, she said, oh, the Lord done let us raise this cotton, let's turn it loose and give it to the cows and everything like that. We need to do something with it. Well, that's why some of those ladies, they made good mattresses and things like that, and made some for other people, that kind of stuff, because it just got so cheap. I just don't remember any too much helping, I guess, because I'm not saying with any reflection particularly like that, but I know wasn't nobody I can remember really just so connected with my family that was on government too much that that I know that they were being helped, because everybody that kind of was related to us, looked like we always had a bunch of beans, bunch of peas, bunch of something to share with them, kind of help, that kind of stuff. And syrup, I remember my daddy and mother, like I said, came from Louisiana, and they would always maybe send back there and get what we call the ribbon cane syrup. They like that. Of course, I guess I grew up here and I kind of like the sorghum. But some sorghum first got started was in the cotton seed and was planted in our cotton, and it grew up. And so Papa gave it to some man. They came over and cut that sorghum, and a couple of mills were close to where they make sorghum syrup. You know how they put it. And they made the syrup. And so he made quite a lot of the syrup, and people would always want to come and work for him. And he that 50 cents a gallon. 50 cents a gallon. Isn't that something? Oh, it wasn't any too much, but I'm trying to say. But he would give them 50 cents a gallon. Now, they'd come and work for him, you know, like so many days, you know, and chopping cotton. You chop cotton for a couple of dollars a day and that kind of stuff.